Welcome to Workshop Wednesday. I'm Chelsea Bussemeyer. Thanks for joining me today in my workshop. Have you ever tried to sew pants? Maybe you have in the past and it hasn't worked out and you've just scrapped that whole idea. Or maybe it's kind of been a dream of yours to get in the game and give it a shot and create some pants that actually really fit you and your body properly. Number one, you're gonna wanna take your waistband measurement. Now, I always recommend taking the waistband measurement and differentiating the waistband from the natural waist. When we take our waist measurement, we want to take that at the smallest portion of our waist. And you may still need that measurement just to get an idea of which pattern is going to be the closest to your size, just to do your flat pattern adjustments or measurements on. But you're gonna also wanna measure the actual location you want the waistband. On this particular pair of pants, it's here. This is quite a high rise for me. I often wear my pants on kind of the lower side, so typically I would even take that measurement lower down. And it's important to know this waistband measurement because it doesn't really matter how big or small your natural waist is. You want the pair of pants to sit where you want them and take those other measurements, your hip, your crotch measurements from this point. So it's important to know both in the front and the back where you want the waistband to sit on this particular pair of pants you're making. Next, you're gonna wanna take your crotch measurement. So you can't take the crotch measurement until you know where the waistband is going to sit on this pair of pants, and take that crotch measurement relevant to the location of the waistband. Now, the crotch measurement I also like to divide into two, both the front and the back crotch, and measure each of those. So I'll take one all the way through, front to back, and then I'll measure just down to the base of my crotch in the front and record that line, or that measurement rather, and the back, from the waistband in the back down to the bottom of the crotch. Now this measurement can be a little bit subjective just because you could move the end somewhat, but this will give you a good idea how you want to divide that full crotch measurement, as the front will always be shorter than the back depending on how full your bum is and if you have a tummy or if it's fairly flat in the front. So taking the full measurement and then dividing it and recording all three kind of combined in that one measurement is good to have on hand as well. The next two measurements might not surprise you, but they are also vitally important to the success of your pants. You're gonna need the outside leg measurement. Whenever we're measuring on ourselves, it can be kind of tricky. I like to just stand on the edge of my tape measure straight down to the floor. Sometimes you'll want your pants, especially if it's a fitted pant, to end a little bit higher than the floor, more at the ankle. But when we measure like this, we can easily measure ourselves, and then bending over, I can just grab my tape measure either at the floor or wherever on the ankle I think would be the best spot. We're also going to do our inseam this way and measure the inside of our leg. These measurements, even though they're not affecting really the shape of the crotch, they will help us also in just developing the front or the top of the pattern and getting the crotch sitting right as well. So it's really important to have both the outside and the inside leg. Last, but definitely not least, you're going to want to measure the height from the waistband to your seat when sitting. This measurement we're going to use to cross-reference that the depth of our crotch is actually going to be a good height when we're sitting. Even in this pair of pants, you can see that the back dips down as there's extra length to be covered. The legs are torquing the crotch forward so that I can sit. And this measurement is vitally important to really ensuring that your crotch is the correct length in the depth of the pattern. This measurement you're going to want to take either on the side, this is an easier place, or at the back let the measuring tape kind of sit where you want your waistband to stay. And as I mentioned in this case, the pants are actually riding down in the back. So I would like the sitting height or the depth of the crotch to actually be a little bit deeper in the back of this pair of pants in the future, or right on the side from the waistband to seat height. Last but definitely not least, you're going to want to have your hip measurement on hand as well. And the hip measurement is always across the biggest portion of your hips and bum. Let's take a look at some not quite to scale pattern pieces, but the shape will help you kind of understand where to take these measurements on your flat pattern. So this is going to serve as our waistband. It's double wide, it has the fold line. This is where the button would be. And so this would be the center front line. The rest of this waistband would overlap. And I'm also just going to quickly remove the seam allowance. So I can just measure from my stitch line to that center front. So this would be the measurement of half the waist circumference or the waistband. And I want to ensure that the other half of the waistband was also exactly the same size. So if it is cut from two different pattern pieces, then measure each one. If it is just to be cut out in double, then you can take this measurement and double it and just cross-reference it to the measurement that you took for your waistband measurement to see if this pants is actually going to sit where you want it to, or if it's going to be larger, which you could cinch in with a belt somewhat, or if it's going to be smaller or tighter. And sometimes if you do have a really elasticy, stretchy fabric, you'll want some negative ease, but most likely you'll want to have either the size of your waistband or just a tiny bit larger to add for that extra ease around the waist. Now, let's take a look at these two leg pieces. Here we have both, just center them a little bit better. Here we have both the front and the back of this pair of pants, our example pants. You can see that the crotch line is a little shorter in the front than it is in the back. And we're just going to reference the measurements that we took. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is once again draw in your stitch lines. So we're going to remove the stitch line so we can cross-reference that the waistband is actually even going to fit on this pair of pants. So we'll just remove the stitch lines on all four of these, or the seam allowance, since we know where the stitch line now is. And then we can once again measure right along that stitch line for the top, and then add the back. So this is half of the pants once again. So if we double it, then we know what the full circumference is, and we can cross-reference that to the measurement that we took of the waistband. Now, for the hips, you'll want to just measure down the distance that you measured your hip measurement at. If your hips are really full lower down, then you might have taken your hip measurement a little bit lower than if you have really curvy hips higher up. That hip measurement was taken at the fullest part of your hip, and it's always great to double check just the distance too in between where you want the waistband to sit and your hip measurement. It might not always fall at the hip line that the pattern has. If we remove our stitch line or the seam allowance once again, then we can measure the circumference of our hip. Oh, I haven't cross-referenced that here yet, so we'll measure that down on both sides. It's about here. Yeah, that's the stitch line. So we can measure from stitch line to stitch line and then line that up, stitch line to stitch line, half of the hip circumference, double that and check. So here, the inseam, the front leg often looks quite different from the back. We have extra width here for the fullness of the bum, and we'll also need that extra width to taper down into the leg. But the inseam, you'll measure the same. Remove any seam allowance you have for the hem. You might have a wider seam allowance to ensure that your pants aren't going to be too short. Move the seam allowance up at the top. And then you can take that inseam measurement, front and back. I would measure both of them just to make sure that they're going to fit with each other and fit with the inseam length that you need. Side seams are typically fairly similar. Oh, we'll just extend our hem marking for where the fold is going to be at the bottom of the hem. And take our measurement right from that stitch line. The outside leg, measurement. Now, the most important measurement is the actual depth of the crotch. So the crotch depth measurement, when you sit on or in your pants, where you're actually sitting kind of in this curve, the seat is kind of right in this area. So it's usually kind of behind the seam, the crotch seam or the inseam itself, but it's in this flatter area kind of right before it curves up. So this is really the area that you're going to be sitting on when you're wearing the pants. So we're going to draw a line, again removing the seam allowance from this area, but we're going to draw a line here, and then we're going to cross-reference it down from that top edge. So if we have a really wide waistband, we might want to add the width of the waistband if we've included that in our measurement. So I'm just going to add a little bit for the waistband and then remove, just start from my stitch line down to this sitting height, the line of where we'll actually be sitting on the pants, so I can see, is this crotch depth actually going to be a good fit for my body, or am I going to feel like my pants are sliding down when I'm wearing them? And do I want to extend the depth of the crotch before I cut this pair of pants out? As you might have guessed, we want to measure the crotch or the length of the crotch seam with the seam allowance removed, both on the crotch itself and the inseam. So we're going to measure that down. Then we can skip over and measure the back for our full crotch length. And if we want to just measure the front or the back, then we can also measure those individually. So here, once we have this measurement, cross-reference with the depth of our crotch, we can see if we need to just extend this leg to get a longer crotch seam, if we need extra fullness for our bum, or if we need to actually open up the depth of the crotch by extending the pant or the leg up higher. As the depth of the crotch and the width of the crotch should be considered separately, they kind of blend together since it blends from a straight around through. So this is the actual crotch length all the way through, but you don't necessarily need more length in your crotch if you have a longer crotch seam. If this sitting height is accommodated for, then you will most likely need more width in the crotch, and adding to the inseam to expand and open up how wide the crotch is cut out will better fit than your body, whether we're including room for a fuller bum or a fuller thigh. There's different reasons for expanding the edge here. Well, there you have it. Those are the most important measurements you need to take of your body and how they relate to your pattern when making pants. You can also take more measurements, circumference measurements of your thigh, your knee, your leg, all the way down, cross-referencing the depth in between all of the measurements as well, and between the waistband, hip, thigh, You can definitely cross-reference your pattern more than that, but that would be the starting place for any pants pattern, any project that I would do that involves a crotch and the body, with all of those curves and all of the shape that's happening with both the hips and the bum and anything else that you may need to accommodate for your body. That brings us to the end of this episode of Workshop Wednesday. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll tune in again next week. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment below or send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. Take care and happy sewing.